The night I saw my husband laugh with her, head thrown back, eyes crinkled in a way I hadn't seen in years, was the night I decided to break us open instead of apart. Let me back up. Hi, I am Wendy. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be the woman stalking her husband's date through the fogged window of La Maison Blanche, our favorite French restaurant, I would have laughed into my Chardonnay. But there I was, 38, shivering in a parking lot, watching Donald's hand graze the shoulder of a brunette in a crimson dress. Her name, I would later learn, was Victoria. Donald and I had been married for 12 years, 2 kids deep into suburban oblivion. We were the couple who had mastered silent dinners and separate beds, our love fossilized under mortgages and pediatrician appointments. I had drafted divorce papers twice. Both times, I would tuck them into a drawer, paralyzed by the ghost of what we had once been. But that night something snapped. Not rage, not sorrow. A numb, surgical clarity. I waited until he came home, smelling of her jasmine perfume, and said, "Let's try an open marriage." His shock was almost comical. This was the man who had once forgotten our anniversary, but remembered to water my succulents while I recovered from surgery. The man who had built a treehouse for our daughters with his own hands, splinters and all. Now he stared at me like I had spoken Swahili. "You're serious?" he finally said, running a hand through salt and pepper hair.
Deadly.
We set ground rules. No one we knew, transparency about partners, and always home by midnight. He agreed too quickly, guilt or relief tightening his voice. The next week, I joined a gym. Donald downloaded Tinder. Enter Marcus, my 28-year-old personal trainer with biceps that defied physics and a smile that felt like a dare. Our first session ended in his apartment, a blur of sweat and tequila. It was thrilling, hollow. Meanwhile, Donald's affair with Victoria unfolded like a rom-com. She was a divorced real estate agent who quoted Neruda and baked him gluten-free banana bread. He texted her daily. One evening, I accidentally bumped into them at a coffee shop. Victoria stood to shake my hand, her grip warm, her eyes soft with pity. "Donald's told me so much about you," she said, and I wanted to claw her throat out. Because here's the twist. She was kind. Kind in a way that made me hate her more. She remembered his fear of thunderstorms. She laughed at his dad jokes. She treated him like a person, not a placeholder. That's when the jealousy began to rot me from the inside. Before we dive deeper into this messy, beautiful chaos, thank you. To my subscribers, you're the reason I can share these raw, unfiltered chapters of my life. If you're new here, welcome. I crave your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever tested love's boundaries? Could you walk this tightrope? And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, what are you waiting for? This channel thrives because of you. Let's keep unraveling this together. Jealousy, I learned, isn't a wildfire. It's a slow drip of acid, dissolving your bones until you're nothing but a puddle of what you once were. For 3 weeks, Donald and I danced around each other like ghosts in our own home. He left lilies on the kitchen counter every Friday, Victoria's favorite, not mine. I came home smelling like Marcus cedarwood cologne, my gym bag stuffed with shame and unsent text messages. We kept the rules. No shared acquaintances, no lies about where we had been. But rules can't govern the heart. Marcus was a distraction, a human shot of adrenaline. His apartment was a shrine to impermanence. Takeout containers on the floor, a mattress without a frame, a single photo of a pit bull he had loved and lost. He called me when instead of Wendy, his hands always moving, always claiming. It was easy to lose myself in the chaos of him, in the way he had traced the stretch marks on my hips like they were art instead of scars. But afterward, as I would stare at his ceiling fans spinning uselessly, I would realize he never asked about me. Not the real me. Not the woman who used to paint landscapes or cry at insurance commercials. Donald, meanwhile, bloomed. He started running at dawn, something Victoria had suggested. He swapped his stale khakis for tailored blazers and began humming Sinatra in the shower. One night, I found him at our dining table, scribbling notes for a novel he had never mentioned. "Victoria thinks I have a voice," he said, avoiding my eyes. The admission felt like a fist to the throat. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had canceled my session with Marcus, claiming a migraine, and drove to Victoria's neighborhood. I told myself I was running errands, but my hands shook as I parked across from her townhouse. They emerged an hour later, Donald carrying a reusable grocery bag. Since when did he care about plastic? And Victoria in leggings and a messy bun. She kissed his cheek, lingering, and he smiled in a way that lit up his entire face. I felt so irritated within me. That night, I broke our first rule. "Tell me about her," I demanded, cornering Donald in the garage as he unloaded tools he didn't know how to use. He froze, a wrench in his hand. "You don't want this." "I do." He sighed, leaning against his pristine Audi. "She's gentle. Listens. Remembers the stupid things, like how I take my coffee or that I hate scallions." His voice softened. "She makes me feel seen." The words hung between us, a grenade without a pin. I wanted to scream, "I saw you first." But the truth was, I hadn't looked properly in years. Marcus texted me at 2 a.m. "You up?" I deleted it. By week 4, the cracks became canyons. I arrived home early from work to find Donald cooking, a vegan lasagna Victoria had taught him. Our daughters, Lily and Emma, giggled as he fumbled with cashew cheese. "Mom," Emma yelled, "Dad's making a mess." I stood in the doorway, gutted. This was the man I had married. Playful, present, trying. But I had buried that version under years of resentment, too busy keeping score to notice he had stopped playing the game. Later, in bed, Donald murmured, "Victoria wants to meet you." I stiffened. "Why?" "She thinks it's healthy." He hesitated. "She cares about you, in some weird way." "That's psychotic." "Maybe." He turned to face me, moonlight etching the lines of his face. "But she's not what you think." I almost asked, "What am I thinking?" But I was too afraid he would know. The next morning, I found Marcus at the gym, flirting with a redhead in Lululemon. He winked at me, unashamed, and something inside me snapped. Not jealousy, clarity. He was a mirror reflecting my worst impulses. Reckless, selfish, terrified of being alone. I canceled our sessions. He didn't protest. That night, I drank Pinot Noir straight from the bottle and stalked Victoria's Instagram. Photos of her volunteering at an animal shelter. Quotes by Rumi. A sunset hike with #grateful. I hated her altruism, her calm, the way her existence exposed every rusty hinge in my marriage. Donald found me crying in the bathtub, fully clothed. Without a word, he knelt beside me, pressed a towel to my sodden sweater, and said, "We can stop this. Just say the word." But I couldn't, because here's the secret no one tells you about open marriages. They don't break you. They hold up a magnifying glass to every fracture you've ignored. And as I stared into my husband's weary eyes, I realized we weren't testing our boundaries. We were testing whether love could bleed out and still survive. The human heart is a reckless architect. It builds walls to keep pain out and windows to let longing in, never realizing they're made of the same fragile glass. I avoided Victoria like a curse. But fate, or maybe self-sabotage, forced our paths to collide at the farmer's market on a brittle Saturday morning. She stood at a honey stall, draped in a cream sweater, her laughter mingling with the vendors as she sampled lavender-infused syrup. Donald had mentioned she loved bees. Of course she did. I gripped my reusable tote, plastic was for monsters now, and approached her. She turned, her smile faltering. Wendy. Her voice was honey itself. I've been hoping we would run into each other. Hoping? I arched a brow. Or plotting. Her gaze softened. I would never. We drifted toward the apple cider stand, the air thick with cinnamon and unspoken accusations. She paid for 2 cups, handing me one. Donald told me you used to bake pies every fall. He misses that. The admission gutted me. He had shared our rituals with her. I sipped the cider, its sweetness clashing with the bile in my throat. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Pretending to care. She set her cup down, her eyes glinting with something sharper than pity. I am not your enemy. I am just a reminder. A reminder of what? That I had let my marriage rot while she polished its corpse? That she could love him better? Later, in the parking lot, she hesitated before unlocking her Prius. You should know, Donald's been writing again. Poetry, actually. It's beautiful. I froze. The last time he had written me a poem, it was tucked into my hospital gown after Lily's birth. You are the storm and the shelter, it had said. Now, his words belonged to her. That night, I drank gin in the dark, scrolling through Victoria's Instagram. A photo of her and Donald at a bookstore, his hand brushing hers under the caption, "Kindred Spirits." I hurled my phone against the wall, then sobbed as the screen shattered into a spiderweb of light. Donald found me curled on the floor, my palm bleeding from glass shards. He didn't speak, just cleaned the cut, bandaged it, and carried me to bed. When he kissed my forehead, I whispered, "Do you love her?" He exhaled, the truth a living thing between us. I love how she makes me feel. Which is alive. The word hung there, a verdict. The pregnancy test was an accident. I had blamed the nausea on grief, the fatigue on gin. But when the doctor said, "Congrats," I laughed until I choked. Life's cruelest joke, a baby to bind us as we unravel. I didn't tell Donald. Not yet. Instead, I drove to Victoria's townhouse, my hands trembling on the wheel. She answered in yoga pants, her hair piled into a messy bun. "Wendy, I am pregnant." Her face paled. "Does he know?" "No. And neither do you." She stepped outside, the November wind whipping between us. "There's something you should know." Her voice cracked. "I can't have children. I lost my daughter 3 years ago. SIDS. The world tilted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you think I am stealing your life. But I am just trying to survive mine." The confession landed like a punch. Here was the twist. Her kindness wasn't a weapon. It was a wound. That night, Donald brought home lilies again. I watched him arrange them in a vase, his movements tender, deliberate. "Victoria's leaving," he said suddenly. "She thinks it's best. Because of me? Because of us." I touched my still flat stomach, the secret pulsing beneath my skin. "What if we tried again? For real this time?" He turned, hope and skepticism warring in his eyes. What changed? Everything. Nothing. But before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Victoria stood on the porch, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching a manila envelope. "I thought you should have this," she said, thrusting it at Donald. Inside were sonogram photos. His sonogram photos. From another woman. There are moments when the universe stops expanding, when time folds in on itself, and all that's left is the raw, howling truth. This was one of them. Donald stood frozen, the sonogram photos trembling in his hands. A baby. His baby, dated 8 weeks prior, conceived around the same time he had sworn our open marriage was just physical with Victoria. The name on the envelope was Clara Hartman. I knew that name. A paralegal from his firm, 24 years old. All dimples and ambition. She had brought him coffee during a late-night case last year. He had mentioned her laugh was too loud. Victoria backed away, her face pale with shock. I found these in his desk. He didn't know I knew. Donald finally looked at me, his voice breaking. Wendy, I can explain. I slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked through the foyer like a gunshot. Then I laughed. Because of course. All his guilt, his sudden devotion to transparency, it wasn't about Victoria. It was about this. A secret so colossal, even his mistress couldn't stomach it. I drove to Clara's apartment in a rainstorm, windshield wipers thrashing like metronomes. She lived in a complex called Havenbrook, the irony sour on my tongue. Donald's Audi was parked outside. She answered the door in a college sweatshirt, her belly barely rounded. Mrs. Hartman? It's Wendy, I said, stepping inside. The apartment smelled of vanilla and dread. Does he come here often? She hugged herself, defensive. He helps with appointments. He's trying. Trying what? To be a father? A decent human? I picked up a framed photo of them at a baseball game, his arm around her shoulders. Did he tell you about our daughters? Lily and Emma? They're 7 and 9. Do you know what they'll call your kid? Half-sibling. She flinched. He said you were separated. We're married. Not for long. Her defiance wavered. He's filing for divorce. The floor dropped. He had promised to try again. I found Donald at the park where we had scattered our dogs, ashes a lifetime ago. He sat on our bench, head in his hands, rain soaking through his coat. When? I demanded. He didn't look up. The day after you proposed the open marriage. I panicked. Clara was there. You lied. You let go first. The words hung between us, a blade with two edges. I sat beside him, the wood cold through my jeans. I am pregnant too. His head snapped toward me. What? 12 weeks. Right before Marcus. He stared at my stomach, tears mixing with rain. Is it yours? I don't know. The admission tore through us. We had become strangers, capable of anything. That night, I lay in bed, replaying the ultrasound clip saved on my phone, a tiny, flickering heartbeat. Donald slept on the couch, but at 3 a.m., I heard him creep into the nursery we had kept as a guest room. I found him sitting in the rocking chair, clutching Lily's old baby blanket. I am sorry, he said, voice raw. For which part? The affair? The baby? Or that I had to find out through the woman you're also cheating on? He winced. All of it. I knelt in front of him, the floorboards digging into my knees. Why Clara? She asked me about my day. He laughed bitterly. Pathetic, right? No. It was human. We had both starved each other, then blamed the famine. The next morning, Victoria called. I am leaving town, but there's something else. More secrets? Clara's baby. It might not be Donald's. My grip tightened on the phone. What? She was seeing someone else, a bartender. She told me at the farmer's market. She's scared to tell Donald. The room spun. Why are you telling me? A pause. Because you're stronger than you think. I confronted Clara at her prenatal class, her cheeks flushing when she saw me. You lied, I said. She burst into tears. I didn't know who the father was. Donald pressured me to get a paternity test. It's next week. And if it's not his, he will leave me. Her voice broke. Just like you will. I almost pitied her. Almost. At home, Donald hovered in the kitchen, a man awaiting sentencing. I handed him the paternity test paperwork. You need to sign this. He scanned it, shoulders sagging. And if it's mine, then you will have 2 children to abandon. He flinched. And if it's not? I placed his hand on my stomach, the first touch we had shared in months. Then you fight for this one. The truth doesn't set you free. It pins you to the ground and forces you to decide whether to lie there or claw your way back up. The paternity results arrived on a Thursday. Donald sat at the kitchen table, the envelope trembling in his hands. I stood by the window, staring at the oak tree we had planted when Lily was born. Its roots had split the patio stones, a quiet rebellion no one noticed until it was too late. "Open it," I said. He did. Not his. Clara's baby belonged to the bartender, a man named Jake who had already bought a onesie with Daddy's wingman printed on the front. Donald's face crumpled, relief and shame colliding. "Wendy, Stop." I placed my own ultrasound photo on the table. "Now open this one." The second test confirmed what I already knew. Our baby. A girl. He choked back a sob. "What do we do now?" What could we do? We were a house of cracked foundations, but beneath the rubble, embers still glowed. We met Clara at a diner off Route 9, the kind with sticky booths and coffee that tasted like regret. She slid into the seat across from us, her belly rounder now, eyes wary. Donald spoke first. "I will support you financially, but I am staying with my family." She nodded, tears spilling. "I am sorry. For everything." I surprised myself by reaching across the table. "You don't have to do this alone." She stared at my hand. "Why are you being kind?" "Because I've been you," I said. Lost. Lonely. Willing to burn the world for a spark of love. Donald stiffened, but I didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. Victoria sent a postcard from Sedona. "The rocks here are red as old wounds. Hope you're healing." I tucked it into Lily's art drawer, a relic for another day. Donald and I started therapy. We learned to argue without knives. He read poetry at night, lines about storms and second chances, and I didn't ask if they were for me. One evening, as we painted the nursery sage green, he paused. "Do you think we will make it?" I dipped my roller into the tray. "I think we will try." Our daughter arrived in July, all fists and fury, with Donald's blue eyes and my mother's birthmark. We named her Cindy. Clara visits sometimes, her son in a sling, Jake hovering protectively. The babies gurgle at each other, oblivious to the chaos that made them. Lily calls them cousins, and we don't correct her. Donald still brings me lilies every Friday. I throw them out every Monday. Some nights, when the house is quiet, I scroll through Victoria's Instagram. She's in Bali now, teaching English. Still kind. Still free. I don't hate her anymore. The family they built isn't the one anyone expected. It's messy, stitched together with forgiveness and fallout, but it's theirs. To the viewers who have walked this raw, tangled journey with me, thank you. Your comments, theories, and shared stories have been a lifeline. If this ending moved you, or infuriated you, drop a comment below. Let's dissect these messy hearts together. Share this with someone who believes love is never black and white, like if you're still rooting for Wendy, and subscribe for more stories that dig into the grit and grace of being human. This channel thrives because of you. Stay fierce. Stay flawed. And keep hitting that notification bell. You never know what we will unravel next.